moving on the agenda, we have our next speaker, Sarah Goehrke. Are you with us, Sarah? Excellent. Good to see you, Sarah. Excellent. Please feel free to set up any slides that you have ready. So just for by way of introduction, Sarah is the founder of the AM specific contract services company Additive Integrity, and also a very key and active member on the board for women in 3D printing and head of DEI. I think, again, there's a very long list of things I could go on at length about Sarah. She's been active in the community for a heck of a long time now, been working with a number of different media outlets, and it's a real pleasure to have you join us with us for this occasion. Sarah will be discussing some of the challenges that we see relating to women in 3D printing and a perspective on that subject area. And this is to spark more wider discussion on wider equity, inclusivity and diversity within the field of additive manufacturing and design for additive. So without further ado, the floor is yours, Sarah.
Okay, glorious. Thank you so much again for having me here today. I am Sarah Goehrke. I've been in additive manufacturing since 2014 when I wandered in. Just off the streets, this industry was very kind to take me in, and I've found and made a very cozy home for myself here. And one of the things that's occurred to me on this journey is that as it turns out, I am a woman. And as it turns out, that puts me in a bit of a minority in additive manufacturing. So let's talk about what that means and how that can seem like a challenge, but is really an opportunity. And it's not just, of course, on gender parity, but anyone who doesn't seem to match the majority. There's a lot that goes into that and a lot that we can make to make a better industry. And so we're at this beautiful DfAM conference, this event, and when we talk about this, those letters, DfAM, we often think design for additive manufacturing, but the way I've been looking at it for the last 4 or 5 years now is when we challenge that status quo of DfAM to make it diversity for additive manufacturing. And repurposing things is kind of something, obviously, we like to do in this industry. So let's dig in about why that matters. Because one of the questions we get a lot at Women in 3D Printing, and that I get a lot the more I dig into DEI, is why? Why are we talking about this? We're looking at industrial technology. We're looking at a way to make things. We're looking at advanced design, incredible software, thrilling projects like RepRap and everything that does for the industry. Does it matter who's behind it? And we can see what artificial intelligence does already. It can give brilliant people, like our previous speaker, the impetus to design an entire presentation around it. And you can input a few things, and AI can tell you a great topic to take on, or some imagery, or this and that. So we're seeing a world where robots and automation are coming to the forefront. But the thing we need to keep in mind is the people making those and the people really making this happen are people. So until the robots actually take over, we really need to keep that workforce front of mind. The why is the who. We need to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to talk about and address and recognize that there are people in a minority within this industry, and they are people who have so much to give. So we need to just keep in mind that the business case is the business. It's the people who create these things, the people who do them and advance them. And so creating additional opportunities for advancement for more people who don't look like that majority to build something stronger and create our next opportunities to continue advancing this glorious technology. And so a few of the things we're going to address here are what DEI is, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. So what does that mean? The business case for DEI. So to put it simply, the ROI on DEI, and then how we can really use this topic to advance additive manufacturing, not just as a technology, but as an industry. And that's, again, an industry made of people. So we look at what this means, diversity, equity, and inclusion. The most kind of charming way that I've seen it defined to make it really make sense on a human level is that diversity is being invited to the dance. There's a dance happening, and if you don't have that invitation, you can't even attend. So it's nice to have a more diverse group of attendees on that dance floor. But equity is when you know the music playing. For me, that might mean the Macarena because I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. For other people, it might be other genres of music. It might be music from different origins. But when you know the music that's playing, that really opens things up and puts you on a more even footing with the other people at the dance. But inclusion is being asked to dance, being invited not just to the dance, not just into the building, but on the dance floor, feeling that you belong, you're wanted there, and you're being asked to be part of it. So that's kind of our quick overview of what diversity, equity, and inclusion mean when we talk about DEI. But of course, it's a business. Industry is business. So you have to make a business case for it. It's not a business case to see we should do these things because they make us good people. Being good people isn't actually a business case, as I've come to realize. And so defining what that means is how you define that business case and really build up that return on investment. So if you look at different percentages, and we'll get into all of these that are here in a couple of following slides. And I do want to keep a little of this, obviously kind of high level because it's a huge, huge topic. It's very easy to get into the weeds. But the things that we can really point out are that there is data behind this. There are numbers and figures and percentages of growth, of investment, and then following that, the return on investment. And the simplest thing to do is pull up data. I really prefer looking at McKinsey studies. You can see some from Deloitte and other very well-known global conglomerates that spend significant time and attention on this topic and really quantify what it means. But the biggest thing we can point out is that companies with more diverse representation across their teams, and then especially when it comes to leadership, that C-suite, that executive team, that senior leadership, when there's better representation there are better profits there. There is a genuine, legitimate business case for this, and it's a double-digit percentage higher than what you might see otherwise. So let's take a little bit of a dive into some of that. So we're going to look at some of the information from McKinsey, and this is all from their May 2020 study on how diversity wins. So you can see that each of the years that they've done this study, gender and ethnicity diversity has been rising. And that also means that the difference in likelihood of outperformance, which is, defined as having that first quarter success versus the fourth of 4 quarters. So that is significant. 25% increased odds of outperformance with greater gender diversity, 36% when you have more ethnic diversity, and it continues to grow, and it's slow though. It is slow growth, but you can really see why this matters and how strategies emphasizing diversity, equity, and inclusion are winning strategies. So it's really important to look that when we have this diversity represented, when we have a more representative team, we do see significantly more business success. And there are so many reasons behind that we will, again, dive into a little bit. And a lot of that will come from the team itself. So not just the results that you look at quarter after quarter and at that annual review, but what the team says. So McKinsey pulled just some quick comment examples from Glassdoor reviews, which if you haven't looked at your own company's Glassdoor reviews, you are missing out on a valuable resource to get sort of that unfettered response from employees past and present who have worked with your team and see how they're responding to management, to the direction the company is taking, and to how they really feel included as part of a team. Is it a great place to work? Or is it full of white male privilege with no diversity, churning out positive phrases but not abiding by them? DEI is one of those areas where it can be so easy to pay lip service and feel like you've done a good job. You get a pat on the back, you put out a social media post for International Women's Day in March. You know, good job, job well done. Now continue business as usual, take no action from there. And it's so much more than putting something out on March 8th for International Women's Day, for putting something out in the US on Juneteenth, for putting out, you know, any of these sort of quick and easy things you can have a graphic designer do. It's not down to the graphic designer to make the statement for your company. They might make it beautiful, but it's up to leadership and everyone on a team to really follow through with that message and make it matter. And these are the things that employees are noticing. You can take a look at how this makes leadership teams perceived by the people that they are leading. And these are just the things that people feel compelled to go on to Glassdoor to review. I've never personally written a review for any company I've worked with on Glassdoor, but that doesn't mean I don't have opinions about them and their actual investment into their team and going beyond lip service. So when we look more directly at 3D printing, recruitment company Alexander Daniels Global creates a very valuable annual survey of salary data and examining the workforce, changes in jobs, the way that people are looking for jobs, what types of roles are hiring more. Is it sales? Is it technical? Is it marketing? Is it HR? And so following that data is incredibly interesting. But an area they've started to really hone in on, and it was a big focus for their 2022 salary survey for the first time, is DEI. They created a spotlight segment there. And through Women in 3D Printing, we've been working with Alexander Daniels Global, ADG, to start collecting a little bit more data about the shape of the industry at present and how that is being perceived, how that matters, why that might matter, why it does matter, and the perceptions among the people making up these teams. And so the thing that I keep trying to ignore is this giant image on the screen that points out that the estimate is that additive manufacturing as a global industry is 87% men and 13% female. And that does not include other gender identities. That doesn't take into account the trans community. That doesn't take into account the non-binary community. So this is a very kind of black and white way of looking at it, but it leaves out a lot of nuance. And what you can see, though, painted with this very broad brush is that little picture doesn't look like how our world does. That's not the gender distribution of the world. If it were, we'd have significant population issues, as well as many other issues, to be sure. But what trends are we seeing? What has ADG been uncovering? And at Women in 3D Printing, again, we will be digging even deeper into this with additional data collection. We're working with SME now in a strategic partnership. So starting in 2023, our annual Diversity for Additive Manufacturing report will include additional quantified information regarding distribution of different dimensions of diversity across our industry. So we are seeing that there are efforts being made and people recognizing this, that on a high-end estimate, there are about 15% women in the industry. And, you know, the published number is 13%. And frankly, that's a little bit depressing. So why do people switch what companies they work with? Obviously, the biggest reason is career progression. Everyone has their ambitions and want to get to the point they want to be at, doing the work they want to do, and then looking at reason number two, being compensated fairly for that. But if you look at a rising focus in this area, work environment and culture is taking on a big lead from where it had been a few years ago in this same survey. And that's the real value of annual reports. You can see those trends changing over time and what people value. And so, of course, the last couple of years, we've been in, I don't know if you've noticed, but a pretty terrible global pandemic. And that has impacted a lot of our workforce. That has impacted the things that we as people, as professionals, as employees, as leaders value. And so we see also better work-life balance coming up there. And, as we can see, people are getting more used to this remote world. My entire time personally in this industry, I've worked remotely. And now I don't have to kind of pretend otherwise. And when I say I'll be back in my office at a certain date, it's more clear that my office is in fact in my home. So welcome to my home. I feel like I can be open about that now and have that work-life balance. And we're paying more attention to that. So also things like commutes are taking less headspace in candidates' minds as they consider new job opportunities. But it's really that work environment, that culture, that is becoming much more of a priority. We know we spend a lot of our waking hours in a working situation. And who do you want to spend that time with? Do you want to spend that significant chunk of your day with people who value you as a person or value the output that you generate? And certainly there's overlap there. You want to be valued as someone who produces value for a company and where you can really do your best work. But how comfortable are you delivering that best work if you feel like you need to hide part of yourself? And that's really where the equity and inclusion aspects of DEI come in. People think that they can hire more diverse people and set quotas and different numbers. And it's not about quotas, but it is about measuring the people on your team. You don't have to place them into baskets. You don't have to say, we will be hiring 7 women for the next quarter. It's not about that. It always is finding the best candidate. And so much more often than we think, that candidate is what might have previously been called a diverse candidate, a diverse hire. And it can be easy then for certain segments of the population to ignore the fact that those diversity candidates have so much to offer and in so many cases are the best and most qualified candidates for a role. And so when we look at this rise in work environment and culture and this increasing perception of the value of work-life balance, 45% versus 32%, 23% versus 15%, the personhood of the work that we do is rising. It is increasing. And so what can companies do on an actionable basis? Because it's nice to talk about big ideas, but it's impossible to do anything when you keep it so high level. So these are some of the areas, and I'll not read slides at you, but looking at the efforts that employers are already making to encourage DEI in their places of business. And you can see that feedback shows up on here a lot. Listening to your team is vital. You really need to understand and take the pulse, and you can't just sit there and assume, we put a policy into place, so obviously we're doing much better now. Is it working? Is it more than lip service? Does it have the impact? Is it being perceived and received the way that you wanted it to? When we design these things, and we need to think about who we're designing them for. So it really makes sense to have the people who will be impacted involved in these conversations. It's one of those, not don't do something for us without us. And so listen to what people want. And one of the things that I was disappointed to see, and I did serve as an expert opinion. So if you read the 2022 ADG salary survey, I have, a page or two in there of commentary, because what really distressed me about the findings in this presentation in this annual report this year was, even with the increasing focus on DEI, the biggest thing we see is ambivalence. A lot of the results say it was neither good nor bad, successful nor unsuccessful, or we don't know what we're doing or how to, or if we should do anything. And so you can see that one of the lowest percentages on this slide is promoting pay equity. So at Women in 3D Printing, we've been doing micro reports for Diversity for AM on a more regular basis. And the one we did early this year was about pay disparity in the industry. And it is real. By and large, women are paid less than men. And that percentage is even more stark when it's people of color, when it's women of color. And then depending where and what part of the world you're in, those numbers can obviously change even more. And so companies need to be paying attention to this equity in terms of pay, in terms of compensation, because as we saw previously, compensation is certainly a reason why excellent employees would seek other opportunities. And so we need to understand that there are certainly challenges, and a lot of that is institutional. So HR has huge challenges in realizing their diversity strategies. And before any of these, I would put establishing and understanding diversity strategies very much at the top. And yes, having to impose new policies is on here, but understanding what that means, working with the experts, developing a plan, and understanding what that means goes back into that initial ROI on DEI. First, you have to understand that it matters, and then how it matters, and then what you can do in your role, who you can work with. Employee resource groups are incredible. So many companies within this industry have developed their own employee resource groups just naturally, and it's a little bit grassroots, but it's an effort, and it's so good to see that increase of attention being paid, and then those groups gaining more power for different communities. Women in this company, the LGBTQ plus community within this company, all of these other ones, really having people to interact with and work together toward common goals and feel that sense of belonging. DEIB adds belonging to all of this, because that's a whole additional aspect. So again, since 2018, I've been, through Women in 3D Printing, focused on adding diversity to that DfAM area. And just last year, we launched Women in 3D Printing DEI, which I had as a full team of volunteers. Everyone throughout all of Women in 3D Printing is a volunteer. It's a volunteer-run nonprofit with global presence. We welcome you to join, to participate. It is not by any stretch closed to men or people of other gender identities. We welcome everybody. And I think you can see why gender equity with 13% was an initial huge area of focus. But launching Women in 3D Printing DEI last year and working with this great team of dedicated volunteers, we've been having incredible conversations, working to understand the scale and scope of the work ahead of us, which is huge, working with external DEI experts who have been doing this for years, and work on programs that are based on actual existing standards outside of additive specifically that we can bring into this industry. We're working on building up a toolkit that will be really exciting and be available for free download, so that you can just have an at-a-glance resource for a lot of areas, and then deeper dive resources where you can dig into those areas. We'll continue the DfAM report series on a quarterly and annual basis with additional insights, commentary, and explorations of specific matters. We've started developing a program to help institutionalize DEI within companies. We've got some big plans. We do need some more help, so I do welcome outreach there. And I think, as we've really been seeing, to add to the additive future, we need certain things that are all topics of discussion in today's session. So I'm really grateful to be part of this. We need to see a more sustainable, diverse, equitable, and inclusive industry. And there are so many reasons beyond all of this. And I'm very happy to talk to them. I do know we're short on time since the last session ran over a little bit, so I am speeding through a bit, but I also want to leave room for any questions. So hopefully we will have time to take a few, because this should always be a conversation. It should be a discussion, and it should be something where we can all participate and ask the questions, the hard questions, have those talks, and address different things. So throughout the year, you'll also see Women in 3D Printing events popping up virtually, as well as gatherings. So also, if you'll be at IMTS in Chicago next week, come find me. I'll definitely be at the Women in 3D Printing Happy Hour on Tuesday. And all of these things keep happening, but we will also continue with the Tough Talks series, where we address the topics people don't really want to talk about, and talk about why we need to talk about them, bring them to light, see how they are impacting our colleagues, how addressing and moving forward with them can help our colleagues, help ourselves, and ultimately help our industry to create better solutions, longer lasting solutions, and a stronger technology. Ultimately, my big, huge, audacious goal for women in 3D printing is to be part of a community where we can help additive manufacturing be an industry that is more representative of the world in which it operates. And so that's what I'm most excited about. And I do, again, welcome outreach at any time. So I'm very easy to find. If you can't find me, that's really on you at this point. I'm online, maybe a little too much. I try to attend all of the major industry events. I am between positions right now in the industry. So also anyone who's looking for a new rock star, let's talk. But I remain active with Women in 3D Printing, as well as my own contract-based services company, Additive Integrity LLC, and on the board of advisors at the Additive Manufacturing Coalition to bring more of this into policy on a government basis. So I know I was speed talking a bit there at the end, but I'm going to go ahead and take my slides down now and just kind of return to base here with our esteemed organizers. And hopefully we can have some chat.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a really, really interesting and really thought-provoking talk that you gave us there. And I think you really quite eloquently summed up a lot of the challenges that the community is genuinely facing. And you quite rightly so say we need to be asking these difficult questions. And that nicely segues into, are there any questions? And I see Joshua's already waiting.
So I have a quick question about recruiting. So I've found, at least in my own research group, thinking of it as like a tiny little company, that getting diversity in gender is relatively easy. I can certainly do much better than the 13%, just picking the top 10 people every time. But what I'm struggling with, and I thought it was going to change when I moved from the US to Canada, is diversity nationally. And what I mean by that is I can much more easily recruit an Indian female engineer than I can a Canadian engineer now. And getting an American engineer to stay on for a PhD is almost physically impossible. So I was wondering if you had any ideas on how those of us in the 3D printing educational space could start recruiting North Americans, which you would think would not be hard if you live in North America. But it's not just me, it's like the entire department, entire engineering, like the whole, everybody. So I was wondering if you had any insights or what we're doing wrong. What could be done better?
I mean, yeah, I think that's the better question, not what's going wrong, but what could be better. So creating those points of appeal, and I know it's a tough time in academia for everyone right now. And you touched on international students and academics as well. And so obviously there's a whole different set of issues, such as visa, work authorization, work study, all of that. Within North America, though, one of the most interesting things I've seen, especially with engineering, is that a lot of, if you look at freshman level engineering courses, you'll see a little bit better of a diversity split among the students, but there's huge attrition with each additional level throughout. And then once you get into the workforce, I wish I had the statistic at hand right now, but it's something like 30% of women with engineering degrees don't work in engineering fields for more than 2 years. It's something very depressing. Do not quote that statistic, please, but it is something that's relatively similar to that comes up in a lot of studies. So a lot of that is that people leave because of culture, and they, on the flip side, they stay because of culture. So making sure that you have an intentional culture that is promoted throughout recruitment materials, that is honest, that is evidenced, that is not stock photos in your brochures, that's your actual team, and show the truth of the team. If you have one woman and one person of color and 18 white men, show it. And as the team continues to grow, continue capturing those real moments and the work that should be highlighted, and just like attracts like, and it is a process. There isn't an easy answer. I wish I could say, oh, just post on this obvious place, and that's where all of the candidates are secretly sitting, just waiting to be excellent for you. But you have to go to this one secret meeting place and knock 3 times. It's a candidate speakeasy, really. There isn't that.
Is there a women, the women's 3D printing group, does that have a jobs board or something similar?
There is a job board at Women in 3D Printing that is free to post on, free to look at for all opportunities, local, remote, anywhere, full-time, part-time, all of that. So that is definitely a resource, as well as the Women in 3D Printing LinkedIn group and Slack channel, which is very active. It's open to everyone, so it's a good place as well to look. I also like Twitter. I feel like I'm one of those last holdouts who's like, I love Twitter and the 3D printing community there, but I know I'm connected to a lot of people in academics, and I know, I'm connected to you there too, directly. But that's honestly where I get most of my academic information these days about our industry, is just following professors and seeing and sharing different people who have additional opportunities to share. Those signal boosts are invaluable. I know Dr. Addie, who's with Desktop Metal, she does that a lot and shares out these opportunities. I want to name a bunch of names, but I don't want to forget anyone, because a lot of people do these signal boosts with additional opportunities, and sharing throughout your network, making sure that it's the best network to share through, that will get to the right sets of eyes. It is a process, but it has to start internally with being a place that should be attracting people.
Oh, thanks, Sarah.
Excellent. Thank you there, Joshua, for that question. I know we're short on time, but I can't resist being our Director of Equality, Diversity and Inclusion in the school to ask a question. So you talked, well, I'm fully aware now that women in 3D printing is a phenomenon that's global. It's all the way across the world, and I've been privileged to connect with the community in the UK as well as in Australia while I've been there. What I wanted to know is, do you find that the challenges that females are facing in the industry evolve and change depending on geographically where people are placed? And I don't know if you've got any insight into that and at all.
Sorry, you froze up for just a second for me.
Did I? Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Yeah, okay.
I can, yeah.
Yes, I was just wondering if you had any perspectives on the differences in challenges that women are facing geographically in the different pockets and pools of activities that are happening globally.
It's certainly different in every place, because the world is different in every place, and that's what makes it great. And we have to understand the different scopes of those cultures and that environment. I know, as a white woman based in the United States, I have incredible privilege. I grew up in the Spice Girls era. It was never a question that I could grow up to be whatever I wanted, and I'm incredibly privileged for that, and I understand it. So for me, the call is more to bring that outward, to use my privilege, to leverage it and help lift people up the ladder, and then if you look into other places, women and girls don't have that access, that opportunity, that encouragement. And while it's possible in so many of them, and you hear about those standouts, I mean, would we all know Malala's name if she hadn't been trying to get educated, and if there hadn't been a horrible system standing in her way? But now, she's using her global platform to help create additional opportunities for girls to receive education. And so that's why, it really needs to start locally and as young as possible, creating opportunities and comfortable places. I was a Girl Scout as a kid, and I remember doing a lot of puffy paint on hats, but my nieces have at this point probably physically 3D printed more things than I have at scout camps and all of these places. So bringing those opportunities to the youth is so important to do these things. And now I know certain universities have volunteer programs where girls can travel the country or even across the world to go share and directly mentor and teach more skills and to be role models. There are organizations like the Girl Gang Garage in Phoenix, where it's all women working in an automotive garage and lifting each other up. And so there's this culture within automotive of, you assume mechanics are men, but you'll see that and those different assumptions taking root and taking place and presenting differently in different areas of the world. And so certain, especially a lot of Western societies, it is, there are fewer barriers systematically in the way. But if we go into Eastern, Middle Eastern, Sub-Saharan African, different cultures, it's more expected that women take on traditional roles within their home and family. And so the women there who want to become engineers may not know that's an option for them. And so we don't need white saviors to swoop in and say, you know, come get educated in the West. You know, working within the arena of the culture where they are and building what you can, where you can, how you can, and having these networks. And really, I think having, you know, the internet today is huge. And so Women in 3D Printing, we have the Type Conference in January, and it's virtual. And the presence from Africa is incredible. I love seeing these students tune in for the first time and seeing a platform where it's only people who look like them on the virtual stage and being able to network like that. So reaching out and creating these virtual communities and events. And obviously I'm plugging Women in 3D Printing a lot here, but it is, you know, the largest one. We have a community of thousands, tens of thousands across the entire world. But smaller havens and academic institutions have a huge role to play here, where they can create these opportunities, and they are certainly so connected to local areas that being able to build in that direct area really helps. But that's a long-winded way to not give you a direct answer.
It's quite all right. It was quite informative all the same, and I will resist the urge to ask a whole raft of other questions because it goes incredibly deep, but we can save that for the breakout sessions, I guess, and hopefully you'll be able to join us for some of those where we do have a Miro board examining quality, diversity and inclusion in the subject area of design for additives. So I'm looking forward to that one. In the interest of time, I will thank you, Sarah, for your contribution. It's been absolutely fantastic having you.